Hey guys, it is Wednesday, November 19th, and you should have your bell work done by now and hopefully turned in and graded. And yesterday you had homework. It was workbook 3-2. We're not going to grade that today, but I do want you to go ahead and get that turned in. Remember, it was supposed to be the study skills practice side only. Couple of quick reminders that you should be working on your study guide. And remember that all of those online quizzes and Quizlet and everything are on my website, so make sure that you are working towards that extra credit. And don't forget that you have a vocab test tomorrow, so make sure that you're on Quizlet and you're practicing those vocab words. We know we need to study those. Don't forget that you have a Unit 3 test on Friday, so make sure you're doing online quizzes, get your extra credit. Don't forget to finish your study guide and get it signed for 5 extra credit points as well. So, with all that said, we are going to go ahead and get our iNotebooks out, and we are going to start our notes for lesson 3-5. So our learning goals for today are to recognize angle pairs that occur with parallel lines and to use angle relationships to prove that lines are parallel. We're not going to actually be doing any proofs today, but we are going to use our theorem handbook to use the theorems to kind of say this is the one that is telling me why I can do this. So you probably want your theorem handbook kind of close today. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the converse of the corresponding angles postulate. Well, we know the corresponding angles postulate says that if two angles sit in the same spot on a transversal and the lines are parallel, that they're equal. Well, the converse of that is kind of backwards. So we're going to say that if the two angles are congruent and they sit in the same spot, then that proves that the lines are parallel. So this kind of, the converse, it kind of goes backwards. This is in your theorem handbook as well. So we're not going to do the construction today, but I do want to talk a little bit about Euclid. Euclid is known as the father of geometry. He was a Greek guy, and he realized that only a few postulates were needed to prove all of the theorems of his day. Remember, this is just barely after Christ was born. This is about 300 BC. But the parallel postulates was one of his original 5 theorems. So we're going to look at parallel postulates from Euclid there for a minute. And it says that if a given line and a point is not on the line, then there exists exactly one line through the point that is parallel to that given line. So basically, this is just saying that if you have 2 lines that never cross, they are going to always be parallel. So just a very simple postulate, nothing that's major that you need to know, but just know that Euclid, this is one of Euclid's 5 postulates that were original. They came clear back from about 300 BC. So there's other converses that we can use, and you should have these in your theorem handbook as well. And they are all of the converses of the ones that we already know. So alternate exterior angles converse. So basically, we're proving that if these 2 angles are exactly the same, then that proves that the lines are parallel. So same thing with consecutive interior. If the 2 consecutive interior angles on a transversal are supplementary, then it proves that the lines are parallel. So this is kind of that converse, that opposite. If 2 lines, again, the alternate angles, if they're alternate interior angles, they happen to be equal, then it proves that the lines are parallel. And same thing with the perpendicular transversal converse. So if all 4 angles or all 8 angles are 90 degrees, then the lines have to be parallel, and P and Q have to be parallel in that case. So this is kind of going backwards instead of saying, well, here's the parallel lines. If then these angles have to be congruent. If the angles are, it's kind of backwards from that. If the angles are congruent, then the lines have to be parallel as well. So those are the converses. Okay, so let's try some practices. So we're going to give the following information here. Is it possible to prove that any of the lines shown are parallel? If so, state the postulate or theorem that's going to justify our answer. So if angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent, what lines do we know have to be parallel, if any, and then find that postulate. I'm going to let you guys pause and work that one out, and then we'll come back and we'll look at B. All right, so we know angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent. So we know that this angle is congruent to this angle. Well, those are corresponding angles. So if they are congruent and they're in corresponding positions, A and B have to be parallel. So we're going to state the postulate, or the theorem that justifies our answer. The postulate here is the corresponding this is the corresponding angle converse, because it tells us that they're equal. So if it tells us that they're equal, we are proving that lines A are parallel to line B. They have to be if these two are corresponding and they're congruent, which it tells us they're congruent. So go ahead and pause again. Try to figure out the second one, where measure of angle 1 is 103 degrees, measure of angle 4 is 100 degrees, and tell us if that can tell us anything about two lines being parallel or not. Okay, so the measure of angle 1 is right here, and it's 103 degrees. And the measure of angle 4 is right here, and it's 100 degrees. Well, if those were anything, they would be alternate interior angles. And because they are not congruent, that immediately tells us that line A is not parallel to line B. So there's no postulate here that proves that, because they're not congruent, so therefore there's not a postulate that shows that A and C are parallel. In fact, we can prove that they're not, since these two are not equal. So this one's for Julie. I've got the rowers out. This statement just says that when two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, the angle pairs formed are either supplementary or congruent. We've talked about this, and we said that this is the really cool thing about parallel lines and transversals, is either they equal 180 or they're perfectly equal. And that's the really neat thing, is that's what makes these easy, is just you have to know which one is which. But when a pair does not meet this criteria, the lines cannot possibly be parallel. So let's look at our rowers here. We've got one guy that's rowing at a 110 degree angle, and we've got another one that's rowing at an 80 degree angle. These would be consecutive exterior angles if we had such a thing, and we know that they would have to be supplementary. But 80 plus 110 is not 180 degrees, so they are not parallel. It cannot possibly be. So if it says, refer to the photo as right, is it possible to prove that any of the oars are parallel? If so, explain how, and if not, explain why not. So we just kind of talked about that. So I'm going to let you guys do this one, and I want you to pause, and I want you to talk about it for a little bit. And this one says, if a ladder is shown, in the ladder, whoa, there's not a ladder shown. Sorry guys, we're going to continue going. Okay, so here's an error alert. So everybody get out your red pens. We're going to stick this in our iNotebooks in red. Error alert, make sure that you answer what the question is asking for. And if it asks for an angle measurement, do not answer x equals 5. So be very careful about making sure that you know what it's asking for, because if it's asking for a measurement, we want something in degrees. And don't forget your units. Degrees are a unit. If it is not asking for a measurement, it's going to be asking for, to define a variable, something like x equals something or y equals something. So make sure that you're reading what exactly it's asking for, so that you can answer correctly. Okay, so pause if you need to get that written down. Make sure it's in red, and go ahead and box around it like we always do with our error alerts. Okay, now that we're back, we're going to find the measure of angle MRQ if when A is parallel to line B. So we know A and B are parallel. It tells us that. And so we are going to find the measure of angle MRQ. MRQ is going to be this one right here. So what do you think you should do? Okay, so if you said that these two are alternate interior angles, and so therefore they are equal, you are absolutely right. So we're going to set these equal to each other and go 5x plus 7 is going to be equal, because they're congruent, 7x minus 21. Go ahead and work that out and find out what x equals, but don't forget that it's not asking for x, it's asking for the angle measurement. So go ahead and get yourself an answer, and I'll be back to check with you in a minute. So if we worked it out, we found out that x equals 14, but remember, this is not our answer. We are looking for what the angle measurement is. So if we're still looking for MRQ, we're going to stick x back in here, and we're going to say that 5 times 14 plus 7 is going to be the angle measurement. So this is 70 plus 7, so the angle measurement must equal 77 degrees. Is that what you got? I hope so. So finally, that's the last of proving lines parallel. So just a quick reminder on some things. Your homework is to be working on that page 224 to 226. Don't forget that it's questions 1 through 39. And this is actually due on Friday before the test. So don't forget about that. Also, don't forget that your vocab test is tomorrow. Make sure that you are working on those Quizlets that if you get logged in, you'll get some extra credit for being on there for the Learn and for the Scatter and the Space Race. So don't forget that. Also, you should have a study guide by now. Make sure that you're working on your study guide. Don't forget that the answers are online so that you can check them. We're not going to actually be going through the study guide this time. So make sure that if you have questions, you go ahead and give me a call or a text message. If you get stuck on something, I'd be happy to help you. But you're not actually going to have time in class to go through the study guide. So make sure that you're getting those questions answered. Ask your friends and whatnot. And don't forget the online quizzes. Get as many extra credit points as you can. Some of you really need them. You need to have a good grade on this test. If you have any questions on any of this, don't forget you are free to text me or call me from here on out. I should be at home resting by now, so I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.